But I do not have a button that
should in just a
says to
second,
speak.
as soon
Okay,
as
let me
she selects the item.
pull it back up.
I don't have sewer. I have something.
Everybody's up? Everybody's joined? Okay, are we ready? All right. Oh, cheat sheet. This one first. All right. It is Wednesday, June 6th. It is 6:14 p.m. We are now into the Solid Waste District Governing Body meeting. Call to order. Those present are myself, Mayor Carusone, Vice Mayor Yates, Commissioner Luke, Commissioner McDowell, Commissioner Hanks, City Manager Lear, City Attorney Slayton, City Clerk Rainbow. Oh my God.
Wow.
I know, right? She must be talking about us. City Clerk Atkins and Deputy City Clerk Vito. Let's go ahead and stand for the pledge. Didn't you say the police? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wow, we were way off sync.
All right.
We need approval of the
Poor
agenda.
Patsy, she's gonna get a complex. All right. Commissioner Luke, did you have something to say?
When we get to,
Okay.
yeah, just
For those of you in the audience, please fill out a public speaking form, hand it to the officer over here, and we'll go ahead and get to that in public comment. Right now, we are on solid waste, and I have no public comment.
Do you need approval of the
So we need
agenda?
approval of the agenda, sorry.
second.
Did everybody push their buttons?
Don't have a button.
You should.
I don't.
Try to refresh. Solid waste.
Yep,
You gotta back out and join.
I
Probably
already
didn't join.
I did, but I'll do it again.
There you go. Okay, so it's been moved by Commissioner McDowell, seconded by Commissioner Luke. Go ahead and vote. And that's unanimous. Okay. And City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the not to exceed resolution for the
We have to
assessment
read by
rates.
title only?
And back at the city clerk.
What?
City clerk needs to read.
City Clerk, go ahead and read it by title only.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I was just gonna
Lost
wait till
without
he
my
was finished
cheat
and
sheet,
then.
and that's kind of what I was gonna do too. But go ahead, read it by title only, and then we'll have the city manager say.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 2018-R-11, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Northport, Florida, as the governing body of the Solid Waste District, establishing not to exceed non-ad valorem assessment rates for the Northport Solid Waste District for the 2018-2019 fiscal year, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Thank you.
Now, city manager, go ahead.
Thank you again, Mayor. All right, we are here. This is the solid waste district's not to exceed rates. Please keep in mind, I want to say this for the public's benefit as well, as these are the not to exceed rates. These are not the rates that we're adopting. These are not the rates from the final budget. These are as high as we can go without restarting the trim notice process. And this year we are recommending setting the not to exceed rates at $230, which for as long as I can remember, I don't remember the last time we've had an increase. It's either stayed the same or gone down, and we are not recommending an increase again this year. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Luke?
I just want to say thank you to Frank and his department. I think it's amazing with what we heard in the meeting where there's a difference in the recycling, and so we're not going to have as much income coming in, but you were able to keep it at that same amount. China's not purchasing as much of the recycle, and so to have a decrease in your income but still be able to maintain without doing any type of increase, thank you. Job well done.
Mayor, ready?
Go ahead.
Make a motion to approve resolution number 2018 R-11 for solid waste district not to exceed rate to state constitution.
You gotta have your thing. No, the microphone's off.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Let's start that again. I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2018 R-11 establishing the solid rates district not to exceed non-ad valorem assessment rate for fiscal year 18-19 for $230.
Second.
Okay, press your buttons.
Did.
Okay. And is there anything on that?
Good job, guys.
You
Already
stated,
said mine.
yeah.
Already said mine.
I just want to say that I am thrilled to know Frankie since back in the day. And probably nobody calls him Frankie but me. And you're doing a phenomenal job. And it's not that we didn't ever think you'd do a phenomenal job, but it's really good to be here and have you running this department with me here, because it almost feels like full circle. Feels like just yesterday when we were talking about roll-offs and how they could benefit our department, and you were only working as, you know, in the department. Right. So you've always had your eye on the ball, eye on the money, eye on how to make this department the best it can be. And as someone who's seen you come from, you know, the very beginnings, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, because you are definitely one of the many that we have, the best of the best. So thank you.
I want to add one other thing. I'm really happy that he is involved in what goes on in solid waste throughout the area, the county, the region. The information that you bring back from being a part of those is phenomenal. You put it to use here and home.
Okay, everyone done?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
just want to have a comment. So we've come a long way in 8 years, and I can't go without appreciation to Monica Bramble and for the job in coming in here into the city and taking this department where you have, and now Frank moving into that position over the past year or so, continuing with that momentum for the efficiencies that you all have found and really turning this district into something that's very sustainable, very efficient, and always trying to find the best way possible, as I know all departments do, but you folks have really done an outstanding job in the operations and the financial management of it. So thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for
All of your
mentioning
staff
Monica,
as well.
'cause she definitely is part of the oiled machine, so thank you. Okay, anyone else? No, let's go ahead and vote.
Appreciate you guys, man. You guys are awesome. And I've been losing weight. I'm trying to get Frank's energy. If I had that energy, I could probably accomplish just as much as him.
Joke, right?
Are you kidding me? This guy's buzzing all the time, man.
I know.
I love it.
And that's unanimous. Thank you all. Okay, with that, we have we didn't have any public comment before. We don't have any public comment now. And no communications, I hope. Kind of communicated out, I hope.
No communication.
Okay, and we're adjourned. You like that? Okay. Now, before we move on, because we need a minute, this is stuck. Give it.
Don't use your finger, man.
Can you imagine?
My aunt does that to her smartphone.
No, I
She
can't.
just whacks
That's
it.
how hard you
I can't
hit
get
it.
I
it to
know it,
do
but she
anything.
just
Look.
whacks that thing.
I don't think it's how hard you hit it.
It won't.
I have to reboot it.
About that IT.
Who is IT?
Where's IT?
Yeah, IT comes to every meeting.
It's right there.
I knew you were that. See?
Look, he's up front. He's like, I'm ready for it. I'm ready.
He knew it wasn't
He knew.
gonna happen.
I think it just needs to be rebooted.
Probably just a reboot. Yeah. It's, I've beaten the hell out of it, and it's not doing anything.
Pete, did you get my answer? From the email I sent you last night after I talked to you?
I emailed it to you.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry.
Huh.
I've been in
Remember those
meetings
6
all day.
emails? One of them's from him.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
How you feeling, Amber? Improving. What is that?
The two sick ones are sitting at that end.
But offering hugs.
No.
I advised him to quit that.
Tell me it just died.
Oh.
Where'd he go?
Here,
He's out.
just a second.
He's getting the pixie dust spread on it.
Waffles.
And now when I go to minimize something, it just goes away. It just disappears on this. I swear to God.
Where's our police chief or
I don't
intern chief?
know. Well, we have police officers, so that's good. Didn't we go there? Didn't we say that?
Pete, did you read it?
Sort of.
So,
Can you give me a number? Because I can't make heads or tails out of it.
That was the fun part of it. Quickly goes on to say no.
Oh, I didn't even see you there, sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Microphones are on.
I know.
Are we ready?
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. I'd like to, yeah. Okay. Are we ready? Yeah. Scott, in advance, I'm sorry. All right. We are now in session. It is the Fire Rescue District governing body meeting. Everybody that was here before is still here. It is 6:33 on June 6, 2018, and we have done the pledge. So please, if you have any public comment cards, bring them in here so that we can get you up here. City Clerk, if you could read by title only, because we do not, I keep forgetting that. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented, Mayor.
Second.
All right, so it's been moved by Commissioner McDowell, seconded by Commissioner Luke to approve the agenda. Let's go ahead and vote. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, Commissioner McDowell.
No problem.
Let's
got
go
you
ahead
back.
and read that by title only because I have no public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 2018-R-12, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Northport, Florida as the governing body of the Fire Rescue District, establishing not to exceed non-ad valorem assessment rates for the Northport Fire Rescue District for the 2018-2019 fiscal year, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, like I said, with the Solid Waste District, please keep in mind, these are the not to exceed rates. These are not the adopted rates for the Fire Rescue District for next fiscal year. Once you set these not to exceed rates, they cannot go up, they can only go down. So I would advise you to please keep that in mind. Yes, they are proposing a 9% increase in rates this year. I know that is a lot. Doesn't just sound like a lot, but it is a lot. This is following multiple years of very little or no increases, and in some years decreases. And this is what the Fire Rescue District is saying, has based their preliminary budget on at this point in time. And with that, rather than belabor the point, I'll just open it up to you all.
I don't have any, okay. Commissioner Luke.
Just not questions, just comments. I personally am all right at leaving it at this point at the 9%, allowing the city manager to look at it to see if there can be cuts come into it. There's a lot that has to be done within that department. A lot of things for the future to come in with that department. And so instead of cutting it automatically right now without fine tuning it, we have the option to cut it later, as we have done in the past. So I'm okay with leaving it at the 9 currently.
Thank you. Commissioner Yates, do you have like a ton of questions?
I don't have questions.
Okay, I have one question. Can I do that? This 9%, what does it actually equate to in real dollars? I own a home, it's worth $220,000. It's on a regular 80 by 120 lot. What exactly does that mean that I'm going to be increased at 9%?
One of the items in here in the backup is the property impact table.
Where?
And
The
it will show
second
you.
one. The
I
second
know,
one.
I'm trying, I think I.
Try to include that. I'll just give you some of the numbers on there. For a single-family residence in the estates, it's about a $21 increase. For a quarter-acre lot, it is also about a $21 increase per year. It goes from $213.17 to $232.32.
So on average, it's about a $20 increase. Is what you're
Correct.
saying. Okay. And this $20 increase, is it fair to say that the majority of this increase is not just to keep the level of service, but it also addresses what residents had clamored for last year, and that was the making sure that our guys were paid the correct amount of money as opposed to all around. So in other words, what I'm trying to get at is that 9% reflects budget requests that are increasing the level of service as well as taking care of our guys and gals.
Yes,
that
this
true?
budget was crafted based on the new collective bargaining agreement that was entered into recently that, changed the pay of all of our firefighters. It also includes expanding the service up into the West Villages area, as well as some other items that the fire chief can go into if you'd like him to. But yes, it's increasing the salaries to get them to the market rate with the progressive plan that was put in there, as well as expanding services and maintaining the level of service in the rest of the city.
Right, and the expansion of those services are kind of wide range, not just additional members, but it's also additional equipment and additional,
Yes, there's some additional protective equipment to help
Right.
protect our firefighters, some cancer preventing hoods that they would wear and gear to help keep them safer and healthier.
so now for the public's purposes, our budget was proposed by the fire department, and you as a city manager have not had the opportunity to look through that budget and cut the costs that you believe need to be cut. And that's budget all the way around, not just fire rescue, correct? Okay. So it is a good possibility that when this comes back, it may be that there is some of those items that may not be in the budget that were proposed to us this week, or this 9% may be adjusted throughout the next 2 years versus all in 1 year. Is that correct?
Correct, this is not my recommended budget. This, like I stated at the beginning, this is as high as it could go based on what you do tonight. It cannot go any higher, it can only go lower.
Okay. So I just want all of that clarified.
Exactly. Can I state something? According to the chart, the amount for the quarter acre single resident is $19 increase, not 21.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
You have one.
go ahead, Vice Mayor.
So I had asked for some information, and we did not get the capital acquisition sheet that we were supposed to get today to show the whole 5-year, which has a lot to do with these numbers. And as I said in the budget workshop, I'm not supporting and will not support even at a not to exceed rate of 9%. And commissioners, this methodology, I think, was sent to everybody, and you can kind of see where the projections are for a 10-year plan, moving out 10 years to see what the level of revenue sufficiency is needed. So that's how it works. And then each year, there's an annual review, as the chief had explained. So when you look at last year's recommendation by the consultant, it was for 0%, and then starting in 2019 at a 3.5%.
I thought that it wasn't, no, I thought that was something like a 6%.
I'm not saying what the department or district asked for. What I'm saying is and city manager can send this to all of you. This is
Okay,
from
well, that'd be
Stantec.
nice.
And based on the revenue sufficiencies, and again, they updated their 10-year from 2017 to 2027. So this is the information that came from Stantec. And the recommendation was no increase in 2018, 3.5% projected in 2019, and then no more than 3.5% each year, which is so different from the original methodology, which was 4.5% every year, because it's a moving target, so to say, every single year. And whether it's $1 increase, or it's $20, or it's $15, to me, every dollar needs a justification. So, Chief, I just want to ask you, with the plan that we have here from the consultant, why is this proposal coming in for 9%? And I do understand the compensation study was done, and even if you factor that in, the revenues came in higher than projected.
Scott Titus for the Fire Rescue District, Fire Chief. So back up a little bit, we'll start off with a little bit of humor. As I stated yesterday, it was uncomfortable sitting before you all as the brand new Fire Chief with a full platter. That's with a P. Okay?
Apparently there was a misprint in the paper that
So-
said he had a full bladder.
It was, now I get it.
I forgot about that one, yes.
And I will tell you, it is,
That's funny.
I consider myself to be a fiscal conservative, and I take the taxpayers' money as seriously as you all do. And so it's no more comfortable sitting here today as it was yesterday. But as I stated yesterday in yesterday's meeting, it's my job as the fire chief to look at where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. And based on my professional experience, based on all the information that we have available, knowing what we have to cover in the future, knowing what our level of service is, it's my job to provide you all the information I think is necessary for you to make the proper decisions. I tell you what I think, what I believe we need to run the fire rescue district. That's what I provided you. That 9%, and Vice Mayor, I have to tell you, and I wish I could go back and listen to it right now, so I'm going to be very careful how I state this. But my recollection is that's not how that occurred with Stantec last year. So
I'm reading from the document.
Oh, I understand.
That's all I can go by.
100%. But that document was formulated after meeting with commission. And if you remember, that consultant, they come and they do an interactive model every year. They make a recommendation, and they came in with a recommendation, and there was a percentage increase after discussions with you all, if you remember. And that's where this phraseology of kick the can down the road has come up several years running and over time, because when we first employed them and we looked at it, the direction involved us was, costs do increase over time. And so it's prudent for us to try and, number one, absolutely control those as best as we can. Number two, try and estimate those. And then just like we do with pensions and everything else, try and smooth those over a period of time. So there are some years where there may be a percentage increase that's not needed for the just-in-time payments of that year, but it's for future needs and things like that. So you don't have these peaks and valleys. There was, to my recollection, and we can pull that information, but there was, I think, a relatively significant increase recommended last year with the idea that we were.
6%. I feel like it was like 6.4%. That's what's ringing in my head. Not that
I'm going to let you say the number. And again, because I don't want to get stuck on the number, but what I do want to say is that this discussion, I believe, was somewhat similar last year, because there was a discussion about moving into West Villages. There was a discussion about where we were with the contract. We were going into negotiations and collective bargaining. And the decision was made last year to hold off and not to do that. If you remember, we prepared kind of a budget A and a budget B. And budget A had West Villages move and everything else, and the decision was made to take that out. So when the consultant came down and did the interactive model with you all and said, this is what my recommendation is, and as the discussion said, well, it's a tough year, what's the least we can get by for the just in time, and that's where that number came out, and that's where that final report came from. So I understand what you're saying, but I think it's a little misleading in the way that you put it.
I'm reading from your document, or the document that you
Understand, I
provided
forwarded
to the city manager, and it shows that the 25% reserve is well met with the direction that you're saying this was commission direction at 3.5% from now, or from fiscal year 2019 to 2023. So if that's what they came back with and they showed you the model, plus this 10-year, which we as the commission don't get, and every year it's very frustrating. We don't get to see that 10-year projected out plan. But it is in here, and the amount of revenue that you had provided to the consultant, that's what they based that information on, correct?
And
That's how they plug the numbers in?
And so I'll tell you, just like everything else, so if those numbers that you're looking at, those are budgets. Those are based upon estimated increases in salaries. They're based upon estimated increases in apparatus. They're based upon what the needs of the department are going to be. But just like budgeting every year, it's an estimate. And so the further away you go from the more different it is. Plus, when you make significant changes in 1 year, if you look at the budget amendments we've done this year to cover the collective bargaining agreement and what that's going to be moving into the future and some of those other things, that's a very significant impact on what last year's estimate was on what our needs are going to be. Last year, there was a recommended increase. That didn't happen. So we made it by just in time last year. But that changes everything moving forward.
What you're saying is not matching the data
Well, what I'm
that's
saying
in
is,
here.
what I'm telling you is, right now, this is a not to exceed meeting. Today, Stantec was scrambling trying to get us numbers, and I can tell you, their numbers are coming in close to, very close to what we've provided you for our revenue estimates at the 9%. They're also providing us with approximately the same change for the average household, right around $20, but they asked us not to publish that because they put it together so quickly today. But I can absolutely tell you that one of the things that we have employed them to do this year is to do just this, to take our budget of what it is, look at all the capital needs that we have, look at what our salary costs and everything else, and put together a revenue sufficiency thing that they can come back and present to you so you can make a good decision in July. But if we cut this below 9% tonight, our hands are tied. And I have to tell you,
exactly
my
right.
fear is, so even if we didn't move to West Villages next year, I'm not sure that without that significant of an increase, I'm not sure that we will meet the funding policy that you all have set for the 30%. So we need to address not only what we need to do this year, but we need to be looking forward. And if we, and if your commission, like I told you before, my job is to tell you what I think. Your job is to tell me what it's going to be, along with the city manager, and then I figure out how to make it work. I'll do that for you. I promise I'll do it well. But I can't stand here and tell you that I feel comfortable at all going below 9%. My fear is we're not going to meet the needs of the citizens. We're going to get a huge spike, and it's going to cause some issues. Even if you all decide not to move into West Villages next year, we still need to put money aside to move into West Villages the following year. Because the largest portion of the costs
Personnel.
Exactly, personnel.
Exactly.
And we've had this discussion for years about capital costs. Our capital costs this year are we have apparatus that are at end of life. We are very blessed that in the wisdom of the commission and with some work with the finance, very integrated, we started this capital acquisition fund. Because if we hadn't, I mean, this would be a really drastic situation. 9% is it's a high rate increase, and I take that very, very seriously. But I also think that the average home at $20, it's not a lifestyle change. And we have the best fire department around. The funny thing is, I love saying that because I'm not blowing smoke, I'm not making anything up, I feel that.
Blowing
smoke! Wasn't bladder, smoke. You all have put the mechanisms in place.
Oh, I get it. I get it.
You all have put the mechanisms in place now because we're struggling a little while with personnel. The mechanisms in place to hire the best people, to keep the best people, to provide the equipment, to provide the best level of service we can for our citizens. And so my recommendation to continue that is this budget. So.
And I understand what you're saying, and I really don't think it's fair to say that you don't think $20 is going to, change a lifestyle. Some people are $1 away from losing their home. So every dollar does make an impact. And I'm very conscious of that. So the other thing I will say is that I have heard this same presentation going back several years. And each year when it was recommended that, looking 10 years ahead, we've got to do this increase. And I fought each year, in keeping that as low and as minimal as possible.
And
And
Commissioner,
we
if you look
ended
at my
up,
slide, if we'd have done a 1% increase from 2014 to present, I would be asking you for a 2.68% not to exceed rate today.
okay, but your way of looking at this, and here's my concern. Your way of looking at this is 10 years ahead, and you're asking commission to increase a rate based on what you're looking at over a 10-year period as far as what the rates would be. This is a non-ad valorem special benefit. It's a non-ad valorem assessment for the current fiscal year for the operating budget. So the commission has never approved this 10-year plan. So you're basing it off of what staff is looking at as the wants for the next 10 years and needs of the department based on what they're looking at. And every year changes, like you said. Every year there's a change in something, and we've seen that. And there was a change on the expenditure side, but also on the revenue side. So it works both ways. And because the revenues and the growth that happened that brought in that revenue, that really wasn't anticipated, we have that higher of a level in property values, which we've fortunately, we've seen that. And those are the moving targets that we look at every year. And this is the reason why I fight every year, to say, We need to work within our means. And what this commission does is it sets that parameter, that we say, here's what we think is fair, reasonable, and equitable, that we need to provide the service as a special benefit to the property owners now, because that's what they're paying for. We have our eye on the future, and we know what we're looking at. So I understand how you're looking at, but again, that's why my question is, from what was based in the consultant's report, even considering what commission direction was, shows the balanced budget and shows the 25% revenue sufficiency. So even if it's not at 3.5%, which is what they have across the board there, which again, I don't believe in setting rates today for 10 years out, but even if we were to raise that to 5%, it's not a 9%. And I think what this commission needs to do is this commission says work within these means. And can that be done? Absolutely, it could be done. Absolutely. And maintaining the level of service and the quality of district that we have. So I wanted to ask you these questions because I'm looking at, your documents that you provided to the city manager. This is what the consultant has said. This is the numbers that I'm looking at as far as, the costs and what we need to do. And the adjustments can be made.
Can I ask, is this the updated version, like with today's budget?
No.
No.
And that's my point I was going to say. And so
2018,
unfortunately, the difficulty is when you have ownership of something and you're passionate about it, it appears to put us at odds. We want to work towards the same thing. So please understand, I don't mean to come across as disrespectful. I'm just passionate about what I think is correct.
Yeah, I know, I've heard it every year.
No, but I want to make sure that everybody understands. I completely understand what you're saying, but what you're not taking into consideration, and the mayor just brought it up, is you're taking a document in a vacuum that doesn't take into consideration any of the changes that have occurred since that document was formulated. And those changes are significant to our budget.
And that's exactly what I said to you folks every time you came up and said, well, the methodology said we got to have a 4.5% increase. We didn't need it. And I was trying to explain, well, the revenues came in much higher than what predicted. So that works both ways.
It's my turn?
Okay.
I understand what you're saying, but when we come to you and ask you for, this is a not to exceed meeting.
Right.
So not to exceed, we have to go off the information that we have. When we get to July, we're a lot closer. We know what the revenues are, and we know what the revenues are coming in. And I have to remind you again and say, there's a difference between formulating a budget that handles just this year and formulating a budget that looks to the future and manages that growth like this, instead of these peaks and valleys. And so you are 100% correct in the things that you're saying. We have come in and said, with the recommendation of a consultant that says, we recommend, looking at this 10-year plan, what the challenges are going to be, what the growth is going to be, we recommend X% for this year moving forward, and then we should adjust it every couple of years to take a look at it. Each one of those years, and you're my hero, because you have beat us down on those rates every year, and you've been very successful, and that's a great testament to the taxpayers here. That's what you're supposed to do. That's wonderful. But we're at the point now where it's gotten to, those kind of lines are meeting. And the difficulty is we've done this just-in-time budgeting to get us through those years. But if we don't start looking to the future now, next year, we're not going to be able to meet that anymore because we're going to exceed what we can do in a year anymore. And I think when we talk about doing a rate increase of a 1 or a 2% each year, when we talk about how it impacts people, you're right, it's a lot different than $20 a year. It's a dollar something. It's a very small amount. And when if you smooth that $20 we're talking about over the last 5 years, it's a much smaller number. And because of compounded interest, it would have been a smaller number yet. But because we didn't do those things, and we can't go back and change it right now. But I don't want to be, pound foolish and penny wise and do the same thing again. I just have to tell you.
Okay.
So
I don't want to belabor this. I think we're just looking at a difference of philosophy. Like we said last year, it's just-in-time budgeting versus long-term budgeting. It's the same conversation.
I have one question that was brought up.
Well,
If
actually, Commissioner McDowell had her light on.
Oh,
She's
so
been
sorry.
waiting so patiently.
So sorry.
So, go ahead.
Just some clarification questions. Looking at the budget The numbers in the preliminary budget for the personnel expenditures of $8.6 million, give or take, is that including the West Village's personnel?
Yes.
Thank you. So basically, from last year's adopted budget, that's not counting the stuff that we had to amend, we're looking at about a 25% increase in personnel costs alone? Is that a fair?
With the increases in personnel and everything, yes. I
Okay,
believe
so
that.
adding the personnel that's in the proposed budget and the personnel costs that go up because of insurance and benefits and wage increases, the pay study, so would 25% pay increase, not pay increase?
Personnel costs?
Personnel cost, does that 25% seem like a fair number?
Just quickly looking at it as a ballpark, yes.
Okay. So does the 13 million budget seem the right proposed budget amount for the fire district? Am I reading this correctly? On page 541, it says 13.243 million.
That's what's in their departmental request, yes.
Correct, okay. If we take out the personnel for West Villages, I agree, we have to start planning for the future. And I agree that West Villages has a need, along with the rest of the cities, for a level of service. The equipment takes a long time to get. So we really, in my opinion, don't need the personnel for the West Villages station this year, definitely next year, but we do have to order the equipment because that takes so long to get here. No sense putting personnel in place until we have the equipment for the personnel to use. Does that make?
What you're saying makes complete sense. We did take that into account. So for the ordering of the ambulances get ordered in October. We anticipate that they would be in January, February time in operation in March up in West Villages. The personnel, our proposal was to hire them in January, get them through orientation, get them trained. Then when the ambulance came in, they would be ready to go.
So these are only half
then-
year?
Yes, ma'am. Those are from, well, 3/4 years from January. And then the ladder truck, you're correct, the personnel for that would be in the following year. We would still be ordering in October because that's a much longer build time and delivery time, so that would come in the following year. And that is, the 9 personnel, that's 6 firefighter paramedics, and that is 3 lieutenants. So whether or not all those people would be paramedics up there, they may not be. So there may be some savings in that amount moving into that. But paramedics have been difficult to get, and that's what we've been working on getting. And so that's the number. That's the number we figured it out. That's correct, right? Rich, we did that.
Yeah, hard to hear.
You
need a lapel pin.
Sorry. The cost for West Villages, we figured the 6 was firefighter paramedic. Correct.
Say it one more time.
The 6 personnel, 6 firefighter paramedics was the cost, and 3 lieutenants up there, the 9 people, and it was from the January, so it was 3/4 of the year.
So the fire truck takes a year to get, and you order it October 1, and it takes a year to get. You still need all 9 personnel?
Yes, those 9 personnel are to cover, that's to cover the ambulance.
That's only the ambulance, it's
Yes,
not even the fire. Oh, goodness.
Well-
Because it says firefighter, paramedic, that's why.
Well, and so
Split.
by bringing 9 people on up the West Villages, adding 9 people to what we have right now, it triggers us to allow 1 more person off. That ambulance would all the time have 2 people. At full staffing, it would have 3. That one of those positions is a lieutenant. Typically, if we spoke a little bit yesterday and I explained to you, our typical model is not to put a lieutenant on an ambulance. But we felt it was important to get a lieutenant up there operating in that area on the ambulance, learning the area and stuff like that. So when the truck came in the following year, I already had an officer that is up to speed with what the target hazards are, what's going on up there. They're familiar with the area, and they're leading their personnel. So there would be 2 people on that ambulance all the time. Rare occasion, maybe 3 or 4 at full staffing, but that almost never happens.
So help me understand what numbers come in between now and our July budget. I know we got some preliminary numbers from the tax appraiser's office.
Correct.
Help me understand what is the numbers that come in the next 30 days or so.
And we'll get, the numbers we got from the property appraiser's office were preliminary. They give us another set on the 1st of July, 30th of June, somewhere around there. That will be updated numbers to those, so that those numbers will change slightly. It'll also give us more detailed information so that the assessment rolls can be done that will show how much individual pieces of property and the homes on them went up. We'll also get information, less and less of this affects the fire rescue district, but we'll get state shared revenue numbers, sales tax projections, all those numbers come in July. But the biggest number that affects the fire rescue district is the value of the homes, because their assessment is a 2-tier assessment. One is a readiness to serve and the other is based on structure value. And the structure values of the individual parcels is what we don't have yet.
I'll be honest with you, Chief. I like what you're doing. The 9%, I'm very, very, and I understand this is a very difficult predicament you're in. Being new, first year, my new fire chief comes in, wants 9%. You know, I get that.
Well, he has a full
I
bladder.
suppose the's no better year to ask for that. Like, they might
Exactly.
get it
It's
over
only going to get better in the next
Hey,
year, too.
can Frankie Lama come up with me?
You cannot have Frankie. Nice try.
I'm concerned about the 9%.
I
And
understand.
because this is a not to exceed, by going with the 9%, I sure hope that come July, when we have more solid numbers, city managers had a chance to review the budget. You really take into account the personnel for the West Villages and the absolute need of that, and also the absolute need of everything else that's in here. I know the fire department is huge. It's right there with the police department. This is what the citizens expect of us, to give them these protections, and that is part of our job. But we also have to be very fiscally conservative about it. So while I don't like 9%, and I don't want to see a 9% come when we go to the final figures, I will support 9% for not to exceed. Boy, I hope it comes down a lot, and we figure out other ways to work around it. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Luke.
In the overview that I was reading about the budget, if I'm remembering correctly, City Manager, you stated that we had a growth last year of 12.67, and that's what they were basing their budget off of for this coming year, correct?
That was for the ad valorem assessments.
For the
That's
ad
not for the
valorem.
fire rescue district. That's
What percentage did you look at?
So we looked at, we were given the same number, and actually Stantec had conservatively told us that, said, between 10 and 20 when they looked over previous years. We went very conservative, and we said we used 10%. So when you look at the fire rescue district, the 10,049,440 number, for that includes a 10% increase of those values that we were talking about. The preliminary numbers that we got today from Stantec are very, very close to that. They're a little bit lower.
All right. But that gives
they're
a
very
little
close.
flexibility right there in my book. I just want to throw out the EMT and the ambulance being in West Village means a lot to me. That's our guys. That's our paramedics helping, and I hate saying this, you're right, our residents, but there's more elderly up there who may have a physical issue, and it's our rescue team that goes to our resident. I know that there's the county up there, and I'm not going to take anything away from them, but there's a pride that I have in our men serving our citizens. So, the next question that I have, though, the 9, I totally understand, is crew out there. What if you didn't have that extra rotation? You just left the crew, the 2 stations instead of working in that man off, and you actually work in the man off with people on this side of Mayaca, would that be a possibility?
Anything is a possibility.
You know me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not a matter of their physical location of working the time off, because when we have an assigned shift, so for the benefit of the general public, I know you all know, but our personnel work a 24/48 schedule. So there's 3 shifts. There's an A, B, and a C shift.
Right.
And so when people take off on A shift, there's a certain number of people that we allow to be off. And sometimes people have to move from station to station for coverage. So,
Right.
so it doesn't really impact just the fact that they're up there. Right now, with our staffing levels that are being proposed here, we would go to 90 personnel plus 6 recruits. And right now, so if you split that up amongst the 3 shifts, that's 32 people per shift. We allow right now 4 people off per day. When you add up, and part of the things that trigger that, and looked in that calculation, is when you look at the number of hours that they accrue, the time off that they get, all those other things, if you don't begin to do that, then you begin to have people that get vacation time they can't take. So that's kind of where you look at that. There is some flexibility on if you didn't do that vacation spot now and you did it in 6 months, or you did it in a year. We will, and we'll look at all these things. And one of the things that I appreciate is, and we do have Stantec. And I think when these numbers come in, if you remember, our intent would be to come back with that interactive model and allow them to show you, okay, well, let's see when we do this and plug this in, this is what it does.
Right.
And I'd feel a lot more comfortable if you all could make that educated decision, keeping in mind that the information is only as valuable as you do it. If you look at it, we've used it in the past sometimes for this just-in-time budgeting as opposed to how do we get there. And it's going to be a big proposition getting to staff a station up there again, because the majority of that is personnel costs and it's recurring.
Exactly. At some point, we were going to get hit with that personnel cost because you're adding to the department. We just added to the department with a new fire station. Now we're talking about a second one, so we're going to take that hit. 25% is a sizable amount, So I was we got a 10-month year, more or less, we're looking at next year. So I was trying to calculate a little bit with shifts and rotation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on, Scott, we didn't get a projected, 3-year projection like they did last year. So in other words, this year, if we did 9%, then they suggest next year is what, 0?
We don't have that yet, but
Okay.
my guess is no. And the reason being is because next year there would still be personnel costs moving up there. So there are some unknowns, and some of the unknowns are, as I mentioned to you all earlier, and we'll be coming back in front of you with the SAFER grant. If we're to be awarded that grant, then there's a decision to be made. And so there's some significant savings over a 3-year period for the personnel staffing. The first year, really, the cost wouldn't change that much because the funding for the 9, our percentage match would pretty much fund all those positions. But in the second year, when we would be anticipated to be up there with all of the staffing, we'd have a 75% savings in salaries in that second year. And in the third year, we'd have a 35% savings. And then the fourth year, we need to be ramped up and providing those salaries 100%. That's if we were to get the grant.
All right.
We don't know whether we're going to get it, but
I was just wondering. Okay, Commissioner Haynes.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I have a question, one question.
Go ahead. One last question, and then we need a motion.
Okay. In the HTE, looking at the assessments,
We're not doing budgets. I didn't bring.
if you
What
can
page?
explain 118, page 118, what you were talking about is this is a 9% not to exceed. But in calculating the numbers here, the amount used for the assessment revenue is at 15% above last year. And then when you subtract the 3% for the early payment discount, which people think they're getting a discount, but they don't realize that actually that's being added on top, so they're really not getting a discount. But that comes out to 12%. So the budget that was proposed to us that we've been in workshop with was based on revenues that were at 12% on the assessment rate. increase.
No,
Would not have
no,
said.
that budget was based on a 9% not to exceed rate. Included in that 9% was an estimated 10% value increase, which was figured in there. That's the 10,049,440 number.
Okay, so a full 10% of the property values themselves going up and adding to the value, like we just got the values from.
So when you said earlier, as we get closer to the mark, and as
Right.
those numbers and property values came in, there might be a
Right.
different estimate?
Exactly.
That was figured into our initial
Okay,
estimates, which is
before
why
you-
we don't think there's gonna be any, there's not gonna be any 10% like, oh, wow, we're gonna get this relief, because we think we're very close to the numbers right now.
Because you projected a 10% property value increase, it came in at 12 point something, so.
Well, not really. More
Property
like
values
9.9.
have nothing to do with fire districts,
Yes, they
correct?
do.
Yeah, they do.
No, it's the structure value,
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
not the
So
land
it's-
value, but it is
thank
part
you.
of the property
So it's the
value
structure value,
Right.
on the
not
property.
necessarily the exact ad valorem values.
Correct, it takes out the land.
Okay, thank you. I needed that clarification, because I'm like, I was getting lost, and I thank you
Great
for that.
question, thank you.
Did you get the number for me as far as the amount of assessment revenue considering the increase in the property values? What it would be at the current assessment rates? I'd asked
I'm sorry,
for
can you ask that one more time?
Yeah, right, I got lost.
I'm sorry.
I had asked what the revenue would be that we would bring in at the current rates that we're at, considering that percentage increase in the property values. I had
If we did
asked,
0%?
what is that number?
Is what you're asking, I want to make sure I understand, you're
So
asking
what
for if
she's
there was a 0%
asking for
increase?
is.
how much more money?
If we kept the rates as they are today.
Mhm.
And with your estimate of how much that revenue would increase by 2019, what is that projected number? What are you planning on an increase being, 10% again?
No.
No,
What I'm asking
she
is
wants to know the
revenue
dollar
that's
amount
going
that the
to come in.
percentage equates to.
I know, but you're looking at next year's.
No, if he gets his wish list and he gets what he's asking for,
No.
what is that total revenue?
No.
Oh,
What-
Forget about the budget,
So
forget
what-
about that.
What are you looking at when you're talking
Revenue.
about the increase for, because it does base off of property tax, so, or the property value. So if you're looking at that property value increasing by 3%, then
I
you
don't
do
want
the
to,
calculation.
I don't want to stop, but I want to make sure, because there's a very, very
It's tough.
strict legal definition, and so I want to be careful to say.
The building
The
value.
building value.
I got you.
and
No,
when-
I know what you
When
mean.
Stantec comes, they
They
describe it.
do all that.
It's a
But
very, very.
What she's asking is the proposed as-is number that
Mhm.
you plan on collecting in the revenue, which may be anywhere from 5 to 10% difference increase because of growth, because
It could be
of increased
$800,000, it could be
building.
$1
Okay,
million,
and-
I don't know.
And then the amount of money you're gonna bring in at the 9%, adding that on top, obviously, what's the difference? That's what she's asking, right?
She said that a 0% increase. Is that the one I think of? This is the one that you sent me late today, so the,
So,
I mean, they had to know that number because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to get to 9%.
so at 97% collected with a 0% increase, the estimate is 9,181,120 for the revenues, and the change in revenue.
9 million what?
181.20.
181,120. The change in revenue from fiscal year 18 is estimated to be $341,120.
300 what?
Thank you, Sean.
40,000,
41,000.
41,000.
thank you.
And the estimates that we figured everything off of, we're very close to that. Our increase from 18 estimate, we estimated at 0% increase was 379,670. Those were based off of, and we got those numbers from
Yeah,
Stantec, but
That's
that was
just
a-
round
That was
numbers,
kind of a stab in
rough.
the dark at the beginning.
Yeah, I get it. Thank
Get
you.
it? Good?
Got it.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Hanks,
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve,
please.
Yeah. Resolution number 2018 R-12, establishing Northport Fire Rescue District not to exceed not ad valorem assessment rates for fiscal year 2018, 2019, the amount of 9% increase.
Second.
Everybody push the buttons?
Yep.
I don't know who pushed first, so it's been moved by Commissioner Hanks to approve the resolution, seconded by Commissioner Luke. All right, to the motion,
Yeah, I think I understand fiscal responsibility, but at the same time too, also understand walking on thin ice. And there's a risk when you're walking on thin ice, and that's not very conservative. You don't have to go up to the 9%, but again, what I don't think is fiscally conservative is in the next year or two, with the possibility, and we had this conversation last year, this is a philosophical difference, I get it, putting us in a position that could potentially harm us and the residents, even by their health, if we just don't have the capacity to be able to handle for all our citizens. And that's a bigger concern to me than the $21, the right now $21 per household. So, so I'm for it, obviously.
In regards to the philosophy, I'll repeat what I said in the other room, is if you have that steady, that's one philosophy. If you don't have that steady, which we haven't, last few years, you have to get that hit at some point. And so that's what we're seeing, that hit arriving this year. So.
Yeah. I know that we have a level of service that we expect and they expect, and we have to find that common ground. So looking through this budget, I'm looking forward to getting more concrete answers in July from the property appraiser's office, tax assessor, whatever, and seeing the city manager's budget and having this bigger discussion next month. So thank you.
And Commissioner Yates, Vice Mayor Yates.
Yeah, obviously, I'm sure you all know that I'm not going to support the 9%, and I appreciate where it comes from, Chief. Like I said, I've heard it year after year. It is a difference in philosophy, total difference in philosophy. And we have a great department, and we also were fortunate to have the surplus that we did. I think it was like nearly 40% in reserve, which enabled us to do what we did as far as classification and compensation adjustments as was sorely needed. And so definitely that is something we needed to do and had the ability to do and could do without it really impacting substantially for this year. So I'm just in the position that I believe we're doing too much at one time. And also, in respect of, and I say it all the time, in respect of the charter, and that charter language in Article 9, that tells us as the commission, and I'll read it instead of paraphrasing, a general appropriation ordinance or resolution shall be enacted to reflect the daily operation of the city for the ensuing year. That's what I take to heart. And especially dealing with the non-ad valorem assessment, which is about special benefit. And it's stated in here that this resolution, we're attesting to that it's fairly apportioned to the properties that receive a special benefit. And that's just where I disagree for this ensuing year. I think it's excessive, and I don't feel that we should, I know it sounds logical that we should look 10 years into the future and spread out an increase because we don't want residents to see a high spike. However, when it comes to taxing and looking at non-ad valorem assessments in the way that we as a government, from my belief, this is only speaking from me, and my philosophy is, we have to do what we need to do for this year. And then we manage the budget and we balance that budget and we actually do things in moderation so we don't have the spikes. So, and that's where I see controlling the budget and controlling the spikes. So I cannot support a not to exceed 9% because I think that is excessive. I don't think that's where we'll end up, but even so much as I think that's excessive. I could have done a 5% or something like that, and I don't believe I'm going to have the support for that, so I'm not even going to, in respect to the commissioners, I'm not going to try to amend this. I respect you all, and again, it's just my philosophy, and hopefully I've conveyed that to where you understand where I am, and it's just where I'm coming from.
I'm grateful to hear you say that you thought, an increase was even necessary, so I respect you saying that.
It'll be interesting next time when we set the actual amount, so.
All right, so, since y'all had your piece once, twice, 3 times, I believe that we're gonna have other numbers when they come back. I also believe that Stantec's gonna do its duty where it's going to, tell us what it should be this year, what it should be next year, so on. And I don't believe that it's gonna come in at 9%. I think that if we do it right, that we can spread it out amongst the next few years a little bit more fairly, so this isn't such a hit this year. Because I do understand that $20 is a lot to a single individual who's living paycheck to paycheck. I get that. With that said, over the last 2 years, I have heard repeatedly from a number of residents, if I have to pay an extra $20, an extra $25 so that the men and women in the fire department get a fair and comparable pay and are treated better than anyone else in the county or in the area, I will pay it. I have heard it over and over and over again. So I'm okay with the not to exceed at 9%, but I am more on what Commissioner Yates is saying, that I would like to see it come in a lot lower, with the understanding that it needs to be maybe spread out. It's not exactly the same philosophical understanding, but 9% could be considered a big chunk of change, especially when you're looking at the increase in your ad valorem rates. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But in the meantime, I am going to support the motion because it's only a not to exceed. Let's make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
It's not to exceed, meaning this is not your final tax bill. Yeah. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and vote. And that is 4-1 with Commissioner Yates sending for reasons stated. Is there anything else? Any communication? No? Good. All right, we are adjourned. It has been the longest day of my life with you people.
Love you.